Helaena. If there was one side character in House of the Dragon that I never truly understood why the writers changed from the book counterpart, I think that it would have to be Helaena Targaryen more than anyone else. I can understand the temptation to whitewash Rhaenyra or Alicent's character, especially if the writers see these characters as the main ones of the entire story. They might believe that the only way that the audience would ever root for them is if they downplay their worst traits and make them more likable to the average viewer. Or at least that's the excuse that most people give for the writers' changes. I strongly disagree with that excuse, but I do understand it and why people reiterate it. However, I don't understand the need to change Helena's character, who is a side character in the story and whose personality and experiences were already perfect in Fire and Blood. Helaena is a good example of a character from the story who was changed and ruined for absolutely no reason. In the book, she actually has a personality and even some agency, sitting on her husband's small council meetings and advising him. But on the show, the writers chose to ignore those characteristics and make her an autistic prophet who does nothing but make cryptic predictions whenever she's on screen.
You'll have to close an eye.
I know it. There is a beast beneath the boards. Not the dragons. The rats.
That is quite literally the sum of Helena's character throughout the entire show. I think that the biggest problem with changing Helaena and turning her into an autistic prophet is that the writers do absolutely nothing interesting with this change. The writers never explore this gift in an interesting way, nor do they ever use it to make the story more compelling and engaging. For example, since Alicent spends a lot of time with Helaena, perhaps she could have been the one to notice her gift of prophecy. Upon noticing that, Alicent could have used Helena's premonitions for her own political advantages, creating the Green Council and advancing Aegon's claim for the Iron Throne. This would have made Helena's character a lot more significant to the events of the story, and it would have made her more fascinating and compelling to follow throughout the narrative. Imagine if Helaena was uncomfortable with being used as a political pawn, and so she deliberately told Alicent the wrong things about her visions and dreams. Imagine how much more interesting that would make her scenes with Alicent, or how much more interested it would be to see how it affects her grief and mental health if those same false interpretations eventually led to blood and cheese. Helena's guilt would be even more justified and her grief would be palpable. It would explain why she'd spend the rest of her days in isolation and sorrow. However, the show doesn't take advantage of this change, nor does it explore it in any meaningful way. Instead, Helena's prophecies are used to give spoilers for future events.
You'll be dead.
Helaena has no real personality or impact on the narrative of House of the Dragon. And as I said before, this is unfortunate because in the book, she has a lot of those things. For example, she sits on Aegon's small council meetings and she advocates for peace and negotiations before the war. In fact, her advocacy is exactly what leads Grand Maester Orwyle to going to Rhaenyra in order to negotiate for peace in the first place, showing that Helena's opinions are actually taken seriously by the Green Council, and specifically by Aegon himself. Helaena is a voice of reason and peace in the Green Council, and in the book, she is described as being sweet and gentle by all those who knew her. This is why even the small folk loved her even more than they did Rhaenyra, because Helaena was gentler and kinder even towards them. This is not hard to comprehend when you consider how religious Alicent and Helaena are described in the book. I think that the show could have made a better effort to showcase that side of Helena's character, perhaps showing her connection with some of the Septons at the Great Sept, or maybe even talking to and comforting some of the common folk who attend services there. In Fire and Blood, it's even said that it was a religious fanatic named the Shephard who was the most outraged about the death of Helaena Targaryen, and that he actually used that tragedy to incite a bloody riot throughout the city, which eventually led to the death of all the Targaryen dragons. That is how intensely the people of King's Landing loved and cared for Helaena Targaryen. On the show, however, all of this love is removed from the story, and the writers actually show the people of King's Landing trying to kill Helaena and her mother. Instead of adoration and devotion, they instead try to insinuate that the people hate the Greens, including Helaena. It is a change that makes absolutely no sense from a writing standpoint, and that will actually affect the future of the story in terms of the justifications for the storming of the Dragonpit. This might be an example of one of the toxic butterflies that George R. Martin was referring to in his blog post criticizing the show. And that wasn't the only criticism that Martin gave for it in terms of Helena's character. Martin also had a problem with the way that Blood and Cheese turned out on the show, because the writers downplayed Helena's connection with her children, and she seemed a lot less aggrieved by the experience than she was in Fire and Blood. Since she was young, Helaena was described as a happy and pleasant person, who would no doubt be a great mother one day due to her personality and nature. This statement becomes prophetic because Helaena was indeed a loving mother who was seldom seen without her younglings beside her. Though it was her custom to take them to see their grandparents where they would play and be told stories for hours, it is also clear that Helaena loved them very much and was incredibly close with her children, which is why her first instinct was to sacrifice her own life during the incident of Blood and Cheese. When Blood and Cheese kill her eldest son anyway, Helaena is so devastated that she sinks into a deep depression. During this period, it is said that Helaena would not eat, nor bathe, nor leave her chambers, and that she could no longer stand to look upon her son Maelor, knowing that she had named him to die. But on the show, none of this happens. Not only does Helaena not sacrifice her own life for that of her children, but she also doesn't cry out when they die. She seems to have had no connection or warmth towards her children, and she doesn't even say Jaehaerys' name after he dies.
They killed the boy.
For some reason, the writers decided to present her as being cold and detached from the situation, barely reacting to her son's death, or being sorrowful that he's gone. Episodes later, it doesn't even seem to matter that Jaehaerys even died in the first place, because Helaena begins guiding Daemon, the same man who ordered her son's death, through his dreams and visions, like some kind of mentor figure. Compare that to the devastation and grief that Book Helaena felt, and you will understand why people like me are upset that Helena's character was changed in the first place. Helena's reaction to the death of her son is what leads to her death later on in the story, which itself leads to the bloody riots that eventually culminate into the storming of the Dragonpit. Without her depression and grief, none of these events will make any sense. They are minor changes that will have a very big impact on the show's storyline, and I think that there are changes that have ruined Helena's character in the story. But what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments section, and if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more content in the future. Thank you for watching the video. Peace.